Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Health and Human Services Council Committee meeting. Today is May 3rd, 2023. It is 5 o'clock and we're here in the Everett City Council chambers. I'm joined by Council Co-Chair, Councilmember Fossey, and Councilmember Tui will be joining us here shortly. Also joining us tonight are illustrious staff members from the City of Everett to help with our discussion items this evening. So for folks listening in, the public's welcome to attend in person or join remotely, but we do not accept public comment during our committee meetings. And they're also recorded, and you can watch them on YouTube they'll be posted on YouTube after the committee meeting is concluded. Today we have a fun agenda, 3 items. The first one is child care support initiatives. Then we'll cover the 2024 Comprehensive Plan periodic update with the housing elements and public outreach efforts. And then our final agenda item topic will be a discussion item about proposed agenda items for next meeting and meetings coming up. So with that, I'll kick it over to Julie Willey to share with us a little bit more about child care support initiatives and what the lay of the land looks like here in Everett and Snohomish County.
Thank you, Councilmember Ryan. For the last couple years, as we've been prioritizing how to utilize our one-time ARPA funding, child care and supporting our workforce and supporting the development of children has continued to be a priority from council. And we haven't had any clear path yet to determine how ARPA dollars could be allocated. We also know that the county has allocated about $20 million of their ARPA funds, and therefore we wanted to learn from them kind of how they've structured their program. And so today we just wanted to invite a conversation with you to hear some of your priorities, some of the things that you think are important for the residents of Everett in regards to childcare, and from that we'll move forward. I provided a document that gives you an overview of kind of just general overview to remind us of just the costs, some of the concerns around access to childcare, a reminder that childcare is regulated by our state, that the city doesn't necessarily have a lot of regulation in regards to how it's operated and how it's licensed and such. Obviously with the planning side of it, we have codes and such, but that's really the extent that we have kind of municipal power over. And so I'll just throw it back to you guys to share your ideas, and I know that it's been important to both of you, so I'll take notes.
Great, thank you. I guess if I can dip into my county hat for a minute, I was active with the ARPA Recovery Roadshow that the Office of Recovery and Resilience put on, and they put on one event in each county council district, and each district across the whole all of Snohomish County, each district identified childcare as a key element for an equitable recovery from COVID and from the pandemic, and a way to bolster our workers and our workforce, just to get people back into their offices and into their places of employment. So glad to see that we could chat about it more tonight. I did take a peek at my email real quick, and the county is planning on announcing their awards for the startup and expansion grants for the child care facilities and for additional seats and for expanding that capacity in the coming weeks. So we should be hearing more about that shortly. So I think that'll hopefully be helpful to maybe identify some gaps of child care facilities in the city of Everett that maybe didn't get funded. And then being able to use our ARPA dollars to see if they have any funding needs to help expand their child care centers and whatnot. I think another key element of when I think about child care and child care facilities is the workforce pipeline that comes along with needing just the people to be working at the child care facilities, and how critical it is to ensure a pipeline for proper training and proper pay for people that are in child care facilities. So I'd like to see our ARPA dollars follow a similar path where it's open up to people to apply for the dollars, but that they would have to show that they're addressing both the child care slot shortage that we're experiencing, but also addressing the workforce pipeline as well, to make sure that we can not create slots and then have nobody available to help take care of the kids that would be filling those slots. So that would be my suggestion, but I'm curious what other things that we could do with our ARPA dollars that would address childcare facilities and childcare shortages in the area.
Forgive my voice. Along those lines, you hit it kind of the nail on the head when it comes to the workforce side of things. That's kind of the duality of the issue. It's not just the spots and the openings, but actually people there to work on those. So I'm wondering how much we can do with also some of our ECAP early learning and the spots and what's going on with our local community colleges, like any partnerships or any other avenues there that we may be able to work on that. And I know that Housing Hope, Tomorrow's Hope, also has their own program that they're doing and looking to expand the workforce there. And if that's something that we can look at, maybe that their model for that, and if that's a possibility for others to also like embrace, where the people actually utilizing those services are also then becoming trained to be a part of that workforce as well. So I'm open to any ideas of where the ARPA dollars can be spent. Yeah.
I think that, we'll have a couple different opportunities that if we decide we want to do more of an RFP and put out for bid per se to organizations, or if we are able to identify organizations that are meeting that need and can help us to develop that kind of a program. There's a couple different avenues that we can take, and certainly starting with ECAP, our local community college, and Housing Hope as an expert and someone that's diving into a new project in our community and really aligning increasing slots with increasing the workforce. So there's definitely potential there, and so we can maybe as a next action go back, do a little research about some more specific projects that are focused on workforce and childcare and see what we find. And we can either talk via email or we can use it at our next committee meeting as a topic. So I don't know if you have any comments.
I missed the beginning of that, and I apologize, but I was looking over the information you sent out, and there's a lot of things that the county is doing, and I don't, maybe you guys already covered this, but are we part of any of these expansion grants, or are they just all county-wide that they're doing?
Yeah, the county's project is separate from ours. They, we knew that we had a priority of childcare, that we, kind of have a hope to use about $1 million of ARPA funds for support of that. But the county has $20 million, and so we kind of wanted to wait and just see. I mean, they did such good work, as Councilmember Ryan mentioned, just canvassing the community to find out what the priorities are. And so we feel like obviously we have those similar priorities in Everett, but let's align with what they're doing so we're not duplicating. Let's figure out if there's gaps and work alongside of them. So that was kind of my first, I believe, course of action would be to connect with the county.
So one thing I know that it's, what makes it problematic for a lot of families is not having daycare or preschool kind of more conveniently located, like on their way to work or on their way home or in their neighborhood. It can be problematic if they have to drive a long way or somehow get, especially those that really are in need to get to those places. So I don't know if there's any way we can figure out where pockets of need are, so that then we can kind of look at trying to address that, or?
Yeah, the county has data about the, what do they call deserts? Childcare deserts.
Okay.
But it doesn't narrow down to the city of Everett specifically.
Okay.
So we don't have, like the document that we had, the information that was shared with me didn't dive down into Everett. I think that, to your point too about that convenience, I think I've heard of other programs where you try and incentivize in-home childcare, expanding their license, working with the state, so that could potentially be another funding source where if we had a new childcare provider that needed some help with the licensing or the, you know, the development of slots, you know, that too might meet that need of, you know, the other part of it, right, that we're such a mobile society that some people work in Everett and live in Everett, other people work in Everett and drive to a job away from their home. And so I think that would also be a really hard thing to say, you know, a family's priority is to either have them close to their work or close to their home, and every family would be a little bit different in that regard, so.
And my other question then is, do we know if there are very many of our larger employers that provide on-site daycare?
It's a good question. I don't,
No? Okay.
but I'm writing that down. I'm trying to write,
Okay.
well, Jennifer's writing all of it down, and I'm writing like,
It'd just be interesting to know, you know, who they are and, you know, because that would certainly be an asset for, I know Amazon allowed dogs, and so they have all kinds of dog things throughout their buildings. So it would be, I think they, I don't know if they had daycare, they might have had daycare, but anyway, okay, thank you.
thank you.
Yeah, I think the mapping's would be a helpful exercise. I'm not sure if that would be something that DCYF would have, like, or, because I know when I had looked for childcare for my kiddos, it ended up being a Google search and just crossing fingers that it was coming up on the first 10 pages or whatnot, but, and then I had asked the county at one point if they had a listing of facilities, and they did not, so I'm curious if there's gotta be a list somewhere, so who's got that
Yeah.
list, and how do we get our hands on it to help
I would
with the
imagine,
mapping?
yeah, I just remember again, I had a daughter 27 years ago, and we had a child care information and referral line, and that was exactly what I did, was called up that information referral line, told them what my needs were, and then I got a list of potential childcare. And so I think with the evolution of 211, I would imagine that that function probably has folded over into that, but we absolutely can check into that.
Great, and I think along this line too, it was mentioned, but I just wanted to double down on it as well, that the, supporting the work at the Early Child Care Center at the ELC at Everett Community College would be helpful. They have a change in leadership that's happening, I think, at the end of the summer, and previous administrations hadn't been very supportive of efforts at the ELC and the amazing work that they do. So with a new president coming in later this summer, just having that connection and sharing how important preserving, protecting, and enhancing the ELC is for all of Everett and Snohomish County, I think would be a helpful talking point.
Is that something where we can actually maybe have them come in and speak to this committee and give us kind of a status update on where things are at, and if they have any plans?
I think you can ask for anything that you want. So like, if that's something that would be helpful, to learn specifically about the
Yeah.
Early Learning Center.
Jumping ahead in the agenda.
Yeah.
It's always good to build that rapport with partners in the community, so it can't hurt.
So just so I'm 100% clear, there's, as far as city codes, you know, it's obviously the code for the public space, the space where they would be operating the facility, but licensing's at the state level, the threshold levels for numbers of kids and where everything's situated, it's all in the state, and basically the only leverage that the city would have is about the permitting codes itself? Okay. Okay, thanks.
And does that include in-house, in-home daycares?
Yeah, the state would regulate all licensed daycare programs.
Great.
Yeah. And again, I don't know the difference of like, hey, grandma's watching the grandkids. Like, we don't, that's unregulated childcare, so we don't. But then sometimes I think grandmas do become like a little, there's like a, I think a, yeah, there you go. So to be able to give them the support they need, the tools, the resources to be able to be successful and get paid. Yeah, exactly. So we have experts right here at our own table, so. So I feel, I'm sorry, I feel like I have a long list of things that hopefully will be fruitful for you for continuing this conversation.
Great. So would this be included in the next round of ARPA allocations?
Well, we have to, I think you absolutely could, we can move it into the next round as far as you want to make, as a part of the resolution that you want to preserve $1 million for childcare efforts. And then just like we've done in the past, we go back, we kind of create the plan and the process and, if it's a grant or RFP, but you've then kind of given your stamp of approval that that money is going to be moved forward with that specific purpose. So absolutely. And we're, the hope will be in June to have that next quarter briefing regarding ARPA.
Great. I would be supportive of that.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Great. All right, anything, any last thoughts, questions, comments, concerns?
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
She likes this.
Musical chairs.
Yep.
All right, next up, we have the 2024 Comprehensive Plan Periodic Update, and specifically how it relates to the housing element and the public outreach process. So we have staff members, if you don't mind introducing yourself for the record, that'd be amazing. And also just to provide a little bit of context too about the comprehensive plan, I think would be helpful for the folks listening in. Thank you.
Becky McCrary, Long Range Planning Manager, and I'm also the project manager for the comp plan update this go-round. I will have Alberto introduce himself.
Alberto Vasquez, Community Outreach Coordinator for the Comprehensive Plan.
So we decided to use our grant funding for the periodic update to have an engagement specialist so that we could make sure we were doing and we'll go through the details of that in the slideshow, but that we were meeting, one, the requirements that we had, but two, making sure we were reaching as many people as possible and trying to get them engaged. So Jennifer, you don't need to introduce yourself, right? No, you're good.
Sure. Jennifer Gregerson, Government Affairs Director, and I used to be very well embedded in the comp plan work, so I will jump in sort of where it makes sense.
So there's, let me start out. So we have a number of housing initiatives that were changed in the legislature a few years ago, as well as this legislature regarding housing. But most notably 1220, which is, has everything to do about our housing element in our comp plan. In previous years, we could estimate the number of housing units that we needed, affordable housing units, but it wasn't really, I would say, on a solid foundation or with any teeth to it necessarily, where 1220 is requiring us to actually plan our growth, housing growth, population growth around the different housing incomes. So if you have heard of HO5, which is the Snohomish County Tomorrow housing report, it's a housing needs characteristics and needs report. And that report actually is kind of just like our housing, or just like our population and job targets. It gives us targets by income level. I won't have that detail for you here tonight, but we are planning to brief the full council on the 24th, and we'll be able to share more detailed information.
That's funny, because that's also the night of Snohomish County tomorrow, when they'll
Right.
vote on those, there's very numbers.
Allocations, yes.
But it separates them by, permanent supportive housing, and then folks who make 0 to 30%, 30 to 50 on up. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting how that lays out across all of the cities, because it will be really different for some cities that have never, that don't have really very much housing in some of those other income bands, and same for Everett as well, so.
Currently, the city's numbers, City of Everett numbers show that we have sort of the middle income housing already. What we don't have is housing at the high end and at the low end, so permanent supportive housing. And so we're getting a lot of guidance from Commerce as to how we do that. So you'll see as we start to unroll our growth alternatives, how we're approaching that particular issue. In addition to that, I think that you handed out.
Oh, I have, yeah.
She's handing out housing policies.
Read at your leisure.
So you'll see that there's just a number of housing policies, and so we are, I'm not sure excited is the word, but we're anxious to get to these policies and really dive deep down, make sure that they're still relevant. We also have work to do around equity and language that we use in our policies. The idea of displacement is also something that was in 1220. And so we have to pay attention to that. And again, there's guidance from Commerce that tells us how we do that. But these are going to be new things that you'll see in this particular comp plan update. Want to say, and the other interesting thing about this round of comp plan updates is that it's the period 2024 to 2044, and light rail would be coming the latter part of that planning period. So, you know, we've inched closer and closer to when that would happen, and this is really the first time that we'll get to take a look at the areas. As you know, the Sound Transit work's going on. The areas around the stations, and the current plan is to identify those as light rail station area planning for doing sub-area plans following the comp plan. As you can imagine, those are really big projects to take on, and we would want to give them special focus and attention after the comp plan. So any questions on that? It all involves housing. Transit-oriented development is going to be another thing that's talked about more than it has in the past, linking the transportation and other services to housing. So essentially, and we did talk about this early on last year probably, we have to find room for about 10 or 17,000 more housing units during that planning period. Again, I'm throwing just some little bit of random statistics here, and you will get the full briefing later this month in a couple weeks.
And what year is that, the goal?
2044.
Okay.
So just to plug the website, we have a project website, and it's everettwa.gov/2044. So there's information there about comp plans in general and just where we're headed. So any questions about the element itself, the housing?
Is there anything that's gone through this year, like the middle housing bill or anything like that, that impacts anything that you're doing?
Yeah. That'll be a big part of it. So we did the middle housing grant through Commerce last year, so I've been working on that and still am, but now with some others. So we kind of have a head start on the analysis for that, but that House Bill 1110 that passed does require us to allow up to 4 units on virtually every lot in the city. There is another path where you could choose some areas that would remain exclusive for single family, for single lot, or single units on a lot. But it also there's restrictions to where we could choose to have those areas. Probably one that is relevant to the concept of the risk of displacement and racially disparate impacts. That's part of that comp plan update and that we got funding for with the middle housing grant. would be places that we think could be at risk for displacement in the future. So the Casino Road area and the Casino Road itself maybe doesn't have single family, but it's not so far off that there's a lot of neighborhoods that, there could be renter households in those single family homes that could end up being displaced if suddenly not just tall buildings go up, but also middle housing, which is like everything in between single family house and, bigger, medium-sized apartment, basically. So we're working on that right now, and that'll be, the grant itself ends in 2 months. So we'll be done with it by then, but it'll get folded in to the comprehensive plan update. So you'll start to hear about kind of recommendations for what that looks like. And part of the bill was that there's 9 types of middle housing. So duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, sixplexes, courtyard apartments, cottage housing, and I feel like there's a couple others. We can pick 6 of them, so, that'll be a policy choice at the end. We'll build in recommendations around that. And some of those concepts are also part of the alternatives that we are just kind of 2 weeks away, I think, from rolling out to the community. So that'll be the first time that people will, hopefully will start to sink in about these relatively big deal changes that are kind of, that are on the horizon. So, yeah, so that, and then the other one that was a big bill, but we are just right way ahead of the curve, was the, I think it's 1337, it was on the ADU regulations, and our work that went through, Becky's work that went through the Planning Commission, and it's just coming back to you guys soon-ish, but maybe not quite on the calendar yet. Pretty much had everything that was in that bill. I think we'd already moved ahead with that stuff, so, yeah.
Can I ask a specific question on that? Where did you guys end up landing on the setbacks for the detached?
The rear setback was the one that we were
The
going back and
alleyways.
forth. There is no specific setback for alleys, and then non-alleys would be 5-foot setback
Okay.
from your neighbor that you backed up against.
What about right away?
That didn't change. We know there was a circumstance that was brought to us to think about. That didn't change in the current
Okay.
code that we're proposing, but we have been discussing it and how we might be able to implement something
Okay.
that was a
Yeah.
little more flexible.
Okay. I'd advocate for that, just given some of our older
Myself, I know,
grid-styled, pattern neighborhoods would be the ones subject to that and prohibited from having density because of these old grandparented structures.
I think that was it.
Good, yeah. Just on the handout that has all of the policies, I gave you guys the draft that has our really, really drafty efforts on amending policies, so that will not be the same in the future, I guarantee it, but I just thought it was helpful for you to see what kinds of things we're thinking about. So the racially disparate impacts is something that we have to do with the comp plan update. I mentioned it with the middle housing grant, and it's things like when we talk about the character of the city, historically, that has been an exclusionary concept. So we have to, think about how to describe the city vision or the city, what do we actually mean by that? Do we mean the way that we were exclusionary at the turn of the century, or do we mean, walkable, safe neighborhoods that, where everyone feels welcome, that kind of concept. So there are changes in there, language changes, and this is also my pet peeve from many years, but changing the word citizens to residents. And then just trying to combine policies where it makes sense, or eliminate ones that are duplicative, or just, because there's a lot of them. So, and we'll have, and then the displacement and some of that kind of relates to the community outreach. So I don't think this one has they're in another place, they haven't quite made it to this draft, but, you know, there's some good policies from some other cities that speak to like how we honor local knowledge and local input. And, you know, I've been to some trainings on, you know, which is interesting. So planners, planners have this professional background, like we know how to write these policies. And how do we then interface with the community and like what individual residents of the city and their vision might be. And that little, you know, that little tension of like not being the professional that brings the knowledge to the table, but kind of being the listener. So thinking of ways to write that feel into these, and then making sure that we like use them for the next 20 years, right? Or at least till the next update. So that's some context for that, those pages for you.
In the drafty draft.
The drafty draft, yeah.
With regards to neighborhood character and whatnot, I'm curious how our historic overlay zones intersect with this document and what happened at the state level, and if there's special protections that the historic overlays have.
I'd say, yeah, the House Bill 1110, where you have to allow middle housing, there is a spot there for historic places. Might be one where you could exclude or not be as intensive about middle housing. So yeah, we're taking a look at those areas as well as we lay out our alternatives and where they fit in.
Yeah, I mean, that's lined up against the other part of that bill, which says that if we choose to have areas that have only one unit per lot, that they can't be in places that, where there were historically racist covenants on the titles, which includes our historic zones, which are also places where the best examples of middle housing exist already in Everett. So it may be that middle housing types are allowed, but they're within the constraints of the design, you know, the historic design review. So maybe you end up with the kind of middle housing that's like, you only know it's there because there's a door on the side of the house. You don't realize that there's two families inside instead of just one. So, but yeah, there are ways that those two can play together, I guess, yeah.
Has there been any, I guess, look or consideration into, I know some research has come out where there's just a massive deficit of supportive housing and specific types of housing for, you know, people with, you know, different behavioral health needs. And have you guys looked into that, about anything that may prohibit those types of housings or anything that may restrict them, or any ways to like help encourage more of that?
Well, that's part of the income level housing that we have to account for, that the city has made room for, and the ability to build those types of housing. And you might recall that 1220, also, we just went through a major rewrite on our shelters and our permanent supportive housing, and so we're already done with that. It's allowed everywhere. It's just making sure we have the capacity for it, but we do have to account for it. But we don't build it, so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's the numbers, so we have to figure out where it fits, and then there's also a policy analysis that has to go along with that. So we have to look at each of those income bands, including in 0 to 30 that's not supportive housing, just people that have incomes at that level, and the permanent supportive, and it's, you know, examining the codes, so like setbacks and things, or things like that don't allow you to build a big enough unit, for instance, or and funding mechanisms. So have we exercised the funding tools that exist that would help those, which largely we have, but that's the analysis that all cities will have to do. And there's like 2 other categories, so that is part of it, and we'd like scratch the surface of that work.
Emergency housing and
Yeah.
emergency shelter, yeah. So our number on that currently is about 2,800 beds for that time period, that 20-year time period. That's a lot, because we only have I don't know how much we have right now, you know.
My commentary is that every one of our neighborhoods would need 120 beds. So we'd need 19 neighborhoods to have 120 shelter beds, so, in 20 years.
Hopefully sooner than 20 years.
And currently, the comp plan, does it have a requirement to include any of those essential kind of necessary needs? There's not one, right? For those like shelter placements and slots and stuff like that, we don't actually include any of that as a requirement beyond just, do we? Like, so what's?
It's a part of the number of
Okay.
that.
We have to make sure we have capacity for those facilities. So there's land and codes that would allow construction of those facilities.
That's the extent. Okay.
Yes. And then the other side is the implementation and partners and money on Julie's side.
Great. One of the reasons I was hoping you guys could join us today, because I saw the email from York about how the amendment process is open right now, and I believe the deadline is May 26th, if I remember correctly, so it's coming up pretty quick. So I was hoping you could share a little bit more about, maybe this is where Alberto can come off of mute and share a little bit about outreach and ways that community members, residents can make amendments, or council members can make amendments, and just what that amendment process looks like in engagement with the community.
Yeah, the specific amendments are, I'll address that. We are going to announce an extension of a couple more weeks. So I think it's June 9th, Friday, June 9th. That will extend that. And we haven't, I'll maybe defer to Jennifer, we haven't necessarily discussed how, if council wanted to make or include an amendment, but let me tell you what the process is, and then, so we've announced it, it's out there. If somebody, a citizen, a resident, or a property owner wants to make an amendment or request one, we've already talked to a few people, they would call Karen Stewart, our environmental planner, or email her, and then she will call and have a conversation and send them the forms to be filled out. And we'll actually meet with them, pre-application meeting with anybody that's interested. We are not charging the comprehensive plan or rezone fees. So there may be a small charge for environmental review, but that fee is about $5,600 or, so anyway, we're not doing it because we're doing it as a comprehensive review. So they would call, submit the materials, we would meet with them, and then just like your annual docket, staff would make a recommendation on the list of things that have come through, and we will take it to the Planning Commission. They'll review that list on whether or not to move it forward in the comp plan update or not. They will make a recommendation to you, and then council would decide the final list of projects or requests that would make it to go through the comp plan process. Did that answer everything?
Yes, and I assume, as we plug the website again, all of this is also included on everettwa.gov/2044?
Yes.
Great. Alberto, did you want to share anything?
Yeah, so in addition to, emailing Karen, the public's gonna have a couple opportunities to chat with us and learn about the comprehensive plan. We do have 2 upcoming open houses coming up. May 17th, we will be in South Everett at the Evergreen Branch Library from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. And on May 20th, we're gonna be at the Everett Station from noon to 2 p.m. In addition to those open houses, we're also gonna be kind of jumping the bandwagon in a lot of the events that the city's gonna be having across its spring. We'll be in horticulture, and we'll be there. We'll looking to be at least once every 2 weeks be present at the farmer's market, and I'll be going out to any kind of events to kind of, be available for people to chat with me or also get contact information either for Yorick, Becky, or Karen Stewart. So hopefully the public will have a lot of opportunities to come and chat with us.
So this up on the screen is, let me go back here real quick. So we're in our phase 2 of the comp plan process. And that is, we went out this last year, excuse me. And talked to the community. And so we've heard kind of their initial thoughts. Now we are, as Jennifer mentioned, finishing up on the growth alternatives. So there's 3 growth alternatives. So we're going back out to the community and say, this is what we heard, this is what we've done. Another chance for input before we would launch those alternatives into environmental review. So those are our key questions here under phase 2. That's starting to be the draft of our alternatives. And then, as Alberto mentioned, we are going to be reaching out to some key audiences. We have given presentations at neighborhood associations. We're always open for that. Seniors, we're getting out next couple weeks here for that. Youth, Alberto's done a good job. He's already got himself going to Everett High School to see if he can get some teens interested. We want to talk to, obviously, our partners, our partnering agencies, our social services, our large employers, and obviously the development community as well. So we have a long list of key audiences that we're trying to reach. And these are all the ways that we are going about it. I'm not going to read all of them, but one thing we're going to try is we are going to have online chat hours. So we'll have somebody scheduled, different scheduled times, and somebody can call in and just talk with a planner. Maybe they don't have time to attend the open house or they're uncomfortable. We're going to see how that works, because that might be a nice way for folks to call in and actually give their ideas.
Will you be able to rotate the hours so that it's
Yes.
different times during the day or
Yes.
weekends and all that?
Yep.
Great.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll be rotating the hours a day. So we're going to test it out for a little while, see how it goes, and then look for days that, we seem to have more traffic, or based on feedback, days that people request, be like, hey, how come, can you guys be available on Friday afternoons, perhaps?
So just a little bit too back on the website, if you go in and look around and you have suggestions, we would love to hear them. Again, we'll get this schedule up. We're just confirming everything, but you'll see that we will be with the Planning Commission and the council and wherever we can find. So we've, phase 1's completed. We're in the phase 2. So just as a preview, phase 3 is the draft alternatives and our assessment of the environmental impacts. That we'll be going back and doing some work where there won't be a lot of public outreach while we get our work done, but then we'll launch back into that. And we will have a draft comprehensive plan and hopefully get to a preferred alternative somewhere at the end of the year and into April, because the end of the year in 2024 is the adoption process. Is there anything else, Alberto, that you can think of?
No, that's pretty much covers it.
I have a question. When you go to the high schools, do you take voter registrations with you?
That's a good idea. I wasn't thinking about it, but I will. I am planning to ask a couple questions for some of the high schools to essentially ask, youth, like, hey, what's the best way to reach out to you? If I were to try to get your attention with, news about Everett, or if you have an interest in living here long-term, studying here, since we have college and university here, you know, what are things you want to change? So I'm focused on some of the questions that I want to ask, but voter registration's
Great.
gonna take with me.
Yeah, same for communities of color that you visit as well. I guess everybody, but those would be my top 2 suggestions. Great. Yeah, and I'd be more than happy to help with promoting the various events and whatnot, and so I'll keep an eye out for the events on social media so I can help promote it.
This should be going on social media hopefully tomorrow, hopefully this week. I know that these dates for the open houses were advertised in the city newsletter.
Fantastic, thank you. Questions from committee members? Anyone else? Great, thank you guys, appreciate the update. I know this is a very heavy lift, Olympic style heavy lift, so thank you for all your hard work with it. Great, next on our agenda is a committee discussion about future agenda topic items. So I wanted to give a quick reminder for some of the things that we had identified during the budget, or during our council retreat on priorities that we'd like to see addressed in this committee. So council identified to addressing concerns around addiction and requirements for services, tenant protections, and rental registries. Administration identified mental health, addiction, childcare, advocacy, and shelter or temporary housing. And then the departments that we have included as part of our committee is Community Development Department, Government Affairs, Police, Fire, and CPED. So with those, I feel like that list is painfully short considering how often we get emailed about the health and human services in our community and the need for bolstering them. So I'd like to open it up for suggestions on future agenda items and topics that we can possibly address.
Well, I have, and I don't know how this would work, but I would sure like to try to figure out what we can do to prevent homelessness. People that are on the verge, you know, a lot of times people that don't have a job or they're retired, and how can what kind of safety net do we have? Or how can we bolster that up somewhat? Or think of something new. So I would love to look into that.
Great, yeah, I think that's, preventing homelessness is definitely way easier on the system than trying to pull somebody back from homelessness. So I think that'd be a great discussion item. Co-Chair Fossey.
I'd like to hear more about what's going on with our local crisis triage and that capacity as Compass Health is being rebuilt. Because I'm concerned that will put extra strain on our ER, which we already have difficulties there. And as far as I know, Skagit is the nearest location for that. So.
Yeah, I think in line with that, it'd be helpful to get a clear picture of people experiencing a crisis, then also people who are experiencing a substance use crisis, and what treatment options are in the community, and how those referrals happen, and then just a good idea of what does that continuum of services look like from initial interaction with a person who's struggling with addiction to treatment to housing to, like, what does that continuum look like, and if there's any gaps that we can help address.
Can you clarify, like, the city of Everett response to those things?
Yes.
Or the community in general?
The city of Everett, our role in it.
Thank you.
I think it would be also good if we have an inventory of what those services are. I don't know if you have something like that, Julie? Or is it too great?
Yeah, I mean, again, like, so that you have it for knowledge, so that you have it to share with the community, like, for what population, I mean, that's such a big question that, you know, maybe just think a little bit more about
Yeah.
how it
well,
would be helpful for you.
I think an inventory of all of it, just because I just don't really know what we have out there. And so it's hard to even think about filling any voids, which we know there are, but what are they? Because there's so much that we need, so. I'm just trying to wrap my brain around what's out there and what we need, and if there's something we can do.
We need everything. I mean,
know.
so I appreciate that. And like my team in particular, right now, we have been granted all of this, our ARPA dollars. And so we really are trying to add city resources so that our community members have greater behavioral health supports. And in addition to that, we are trying to work with our community partners to do increased shelter, identify, potentially create a day center. So our plate is kind of full. And so so that question to me is really more about what does our community have? What does our county have? A lot of these organizations aren't just Everett specific. They're trying to help countywide. So it really becomes this big body of work when we really know that we have so many crises. You know, we have just, the list goes on and on. So I'm happy to help get you the information that you need, but I also have to be a little bit sensitive to the amount of work and what it's going to lead to and how it's going to be helpful.
Is there something out there that actually identifies the gaps in our system right now? So if we're wanting to put dollars towards someplace, it's hard to address the problem when you don't know. Yes, there's a need everywhere, but where is the backlog? For instance, if you have somebody going to Evergreen Recovery Center, and it's somebody that's going through the program and they're getting their help and then they want to transition. Is there enough transitional housing that next step on, or is there a backlog there because they simply can't go on and so there's not vacancies in the program? Like where are those kind of gaps happening? Where are those barriers and those backlogs starting? I think that is helpful for moving forward with how we do our policy. So if that's not an assessment or there's not that information somewhere, at least for the county, that we can look at, then we need to figure out a way to get that information and do that assessment and pay for it.
Well, I totally agree with you that it is a county function. We don't have a human services department. We don't have the funding mechanisms that our county has in order to, support our services throughout our whole entire county. And so we as a municipality, I can absolutely work with our social workers and our community support team to help you understand what our barriers are or what we don't have, but that doesn't mean that we will then have the resources, the money, the agencies, or the county support to help us to get those things. So
Totally understood, but it helps us with when we're deciding on our legislative advocacy and those type of priorities and what we're actually fighting for. It helps us to have that knowledge when we're deciding the policy directions we want to go for, or when we have things like ARPA dollars that we want to put them. In order to make these decisions, I think having what you're asking for and figuring out where those gaps in the system are, where those barriers are, because yes, there's a deficit across the board, but where are the areas that we can help improve that either through policy, legislative advocacy, county advocacy, and be better to be able to do our jobs. And if it's something where you don't have the capacity or that body of data doesn't already currently exist that's easily accessible, maybe that's something that we need to be looking forward in the budget to either do a study or pay for an assessment, because you guys are stretched thin.
Great, yeah, I think resource mapping would be helpful, I agree. So but I do agree that, I know the county has a list of resources, but it's more of just like a PDF instead of, I picture it as like an actual continuum timeline of showing where the stepping stones are for people to help them get to a place of stability. So I think that the county would have more capacity to help put that together than the city would for sure, but knowing that when folks come out of jail or come out of treatment, there's no housing available, just knowing where those cliff falls are, I think is helpful for the public's expectations of things that we can help with and ways that we can focus efforts in the future as well. So I don't know if it means that a future agenda item could be to invite the county to come share with us about, do we know anybody that works for the county? I don't know. To share more about just resource mapping efforts, or if they have one in place already, what that looks like. And then I'm sure they can hone the data in based off of geographical area as well, so, yeah. I had an idea and it totally flittered away. Oh, it was a good one. Oh, man, dang it. All right, somebody else go. I'll think, maybe it'll pop back. All right, I'll remember it like as soon as we adjourn and then blurt it out for everybody, so. Great, any other, if folks have other ideas that come to mind at any point, feel free to email myself, Councilmember Fosse, and we'd be happy to put it on future agendas for discussion, and if there's anything that we're not thinking of too, like, please let us know so that we can use our time wisely.
Well, I noted earlier the Early Learning Center at Everett Community College, so I can reach out and see if we can get them scheduled. And then this conversation that we just had, I think we'll talk about, the timing and what that kind of looks like. And maybe it is having the county human services folks come, or you remembered it. So, but yeah, we'll take a little time to figure out where that will fit, and maybe we'll, see how that goes. So.
Bing, I remembered. So as I mentioned last month, a question I get often is, how are we measuring success? And so some of the things that the council's done in the last few years is to fund the pallet shelter down at Everett Gospel Mission, and it's been in place for a while now. So I think inviting them to share about how that investment has been working out for them, for our homeless community, and what successes they're seeing to make sure that our investment was a good avenue, I think it'd be a great follow-up, and I think it'd be insightful to hear about just how Pallet's coming along.
We could add Claire's Place to that.
Sure. See, I think the public would appreciate hearing success stories. That's what I'm sure we all would. Great, anything else?
Julie, do you have any further update on the new pallet shelter for the women and children? Is there any update on the progress of that proposal?
The VOA
Yes.
site, it's moving, it's progressing, it's moving forward. We are just in the process of purchasing kind of the additional accessory units, like the restrooms. You might remember we already purchased the 20 pallets. They've been in storage, and so those are ready to be deployed. And so it's just like this fine line between when the pallets will be able to be ordered and delivered, and when our Public Works Department will be able to complete the site development, and it's all continuing to move along. I keep saying fall and hopes and dreams, but that's, we're working through kind of that lease process and all of that behind-the-scenes work that has to be done in order to execute that project.
Is there any more community outreach going to happen, or is that done?
We've talked to VOA about kind of re-engaging, and I don't have a plan right now, but it's part of the conversation. That, it's a good idea, right, to continue to engage with the community and share your plans.
I've had a couple people thinking, because nothing, it doesn't look like anything's happened there, they're thinking that maybe it's not going to happen, and so I didn't want them to be surprised that one day it's there.
Yeah, thank you. I will bring that back up. I actually just had that conversation with my team
Okay.
Earlier this week.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Great, any last thoughts, questions, comments, concerns? Great, and with that, it is 5:58 and we are adjourned. Thank you.